And people that don't believe it doesn't work, try it out, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
How you communicate, how you show up on time, how are you dressed? It was lacking in my generation. It's lacking in the next generation.
Welcome back to the Uncharted podcast. Today, I have Gelina Reed with us today. Welcome, Jillian.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Excited to have you. So let's get started with when you first got into this industry. Was leasing, I think you became a leasing specialist?
Yes. Yeah. So my career's taken a few different turns, it is a very interesting story. So I'm glad to be able to share it with others. But I started leasing apartments when I was 17. Had no clue what I was doing. I think I was making $8.25 an hour, $8.25 an hour. I thought I was rich after I started getting those small paychecks. But yeah, I loved I had a very strong work ethic that was planted in me from my mother. So she was a single parent, raising me and my twin brother. And so she kind of instilled a lot of that in me. So I started working through college. I went to school for sign language interpreting, believe it or not. So I love sign language. I love deaf culture. And I did that. That was more of my passion. And when I went to school, I did pick something that I was passionate about. I wasn't really thinking like long term of, what I really wanted to do that would make me a decent income, right? Which it does pay well. But that's kind of how my story began. Like I started leasing apartments at 17 while I was going to college for sign language interpreting. Yeah.
So on that, how did you get into it at 17? I'm really curious about it.
So my mom was actually in the business. So she got me into apartments. Yeah. So she recommended me. It was for like a mom and pop company. So they really, I don't want to like say too much on that, but it probably wasn't operating like super ethically. And I didn't know that at the time, right? I just was right place at the right time. And I just started working. So I was there for a few months, and then I actually worked at Chick-fil-A for a like short period of time after that. And that's where I learned all of my customer service skills. And then I did that, and then I got back in leasing shortly after. So yeah, 12 years in real estate property management. So yeah, it's a crazy journey.
From when you started to Man and Clay, was there any other company between there?
So Man and Clay Apartments was the first luxury Class A apartment community in Kentucky, selling the highest rents. Yeah. So at the time, it was almost like a new part of real estate in Kentucky. And the reason why is there were typically like older properties that were being renovated, and the property value was very inexpensive. So you had developers coming in from other places to develop real estate in Louisville. So I managed, we had the highest rents in Kentucky at the time. It was one of the first Class A properties there. We created a very unique experience at Main and Clay. We had we actually had a summer concert series there. We had a live-in artist, which is wild to me. It was one of the first properties I'd ever been at that had something like that. And we created just a new level of luxury experience, which was really fun, that hadn't really been done before. And it was with Bristol Development out of Tennessee. I worked for Greystar Property Management. Before that, I was a manager for a few years, but it was an older apartment community, right? Like the rents were pretty minimal. So that was my first experience with high rents. I think the largest like penthouse apartment I had at the time was about $2,600 per month, which even 5 years ago was wild. Yeah.
Yeah. That's insane.
Yeah. $2,600 a month for an apartment, but they were beautiful and people paid the rent. I think one of the things you'd asked me before was how we got highest rents there and how we were successful. A lot of that was through very effective marketing. So a lot of these companies spend, thousands of dollars per month marketing their business. And that's how honestly they're able to be successful. It takes that to draw in the right clientele.
What strategies were you doing at that point in time to get the highest rates?
Yeah. So in real estate property management, every strategy is different. Our ownership, they offered like move-in incentives. So that was a big push, right? Like getting people in the door, getting some good incentives. We would run a lot of like promos. So we would do like, hey, rent this weekend, and then we'll give you a month or two free. And that was a big pull, like draw for people. But yeah, we gave away like smart home appliances. We gave away gift cards. Like there's a lot of creative things that you can do to draw people in and win business, but that was our strategy at the time.
What is the biggest misconception about your industry?
A lot of people don't
About
start
that
out when they're
industry
young
specifically?
thinking I'm going to get in
So
property management. Right? It's not like
was,
something you really.
a lot of
they
people
have
don't start
college
out when
degrees
they're
for
young
property management,
thinking,
believe it or
I'm
not,
going
but
to
it's
get
not
in
something
property
you go to school
management, right?
for.
It's not like
So
something
I
you
kind of
really-
fell into
they have college
that
degrees
industry
for property
because
management, believe it or not,
it
but it's
paid
not
well
something
for
you go
someone
to
my
school
age.
for.
And I think common misconceptions are that property managers, they look really pretty sitting behind a desk, but it's actually incredibly hard physical work as well. I would walk my property and pick up trash. I would hand out letters. I would have difficult conversations with residents. We would actually do outreach marketing, which seems kind of old fashioned, but we would take flyers down the street or like hang posters. So it's a lot of like, you're hitting the pavement. It's not something that is super easy. There's a lot of like legal, like red tape involved. Like you have contracts, you're working with owners. You have to make sure that your property is not open to risk. Like if somebody trips over a pool chair and falls on the pool deck or something, like there's all kinds of things, a pothole in the parking lot, like things you would never think of until you deal with it every day. So I think that's a common misconception, is just that it's a glamorous role. It definitely has glamour to it. I got to be on television a few times. I was in the local newspaper, which was cool and fun, but it was hard work for sure.
Did you have anybody in your time there that deliberately went and tried to trip over something to try and sue it?
I feel like there's always those people. Like whenever you work with people, you start to learn how to read like those social cues. Like I moved someone in and I knew as soon as they moved in, like that's going to be the person, like they're going to find something to come after us for. And it honestly, you just try to kill people with kindness. You just work to win people over. And that honestly works a lot of the time, is just being open and having good conversations. Some people are, if you kill them with kindness, I even had somebody that, this guy went off on me about something that wasn't, I can't even remember what the situation was, but I was so nice to him that he like brought me a gift the next day and apologized. So I think just taking that extra step and being willing to communicate goes a long way. It goes a long way.
So with going through all of that to date, what is the biggest accomplishment for you?
So in real estate, I was in property management for 12 years. I did make a career shift to get into tech sales 2 years ago. I now work at Cisco Systems, which is one of the largest IT companies in the world. So it was I think part of my biggest accomplishment in my career was being willing to take that risk and make a change. So I was 29. Now I'm 31. I was 29 when I made the change. And most people are not, a lot of people, I should say, are scared to make those changes, right? Because they feel, I was in something for 12 years. I knew it inside and out. I loved what I did, but I got to the point where I felt like real estate property management wasn't really innovating like I wanted to. I wanted to move quick, right? I wanted to make more money, which most people do, and technology opened those doors for me. So I think just being curious and being willing to take risk is my biggest accomplishment personally. I never ever want to get stuck even today, right? Like I never want to get in a position where I feel comfortable, because whenever you take a step outside of that comfort level, amazing things happen. Just being willing to have like the confidence to take chances. So I think that's my biggest accomplishment professionally. I always say my relationship with my husband and my marriage is my biggest personal accomplishment. So I always want to bring that up because I think it's really important. Most important.
And you said in 12 years you were promoted 5 times.
Yes.
What kind of work ethic did that take?
So honestly, it's not like I have like some magical power that made me stand out above other people. I will say it's very basic things. One of it is a lot of people only do the duties in their job description and nothing outside of that. They look at the money that they're making and they feel like, okay, I'm only good enough to make $15 an hour, so I'm going to put in $15 an hour minimum work ethic.
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Something that annoys me.
I was never that way. I always dressed for the job that I wanted, not the job that I had, and I worked that way. So I always had a mentor or a buddy, and I would say, show me everything you do. So when I was in a leasing position, I would go to my manager, even my assistant, and I would say, like, let me shadow what you're doing. I want to learn everything that you do, because I want to, if you're not here and you're sick, I want to be able to fill in for you. So I think just taking that next step and having initiative was number one. Also, I feel like in today's day and age, like you can't get people to show up on time for work. You can't get them to show up and look professional. So like literally just doing the basics makes you
Yes,
stand out, like the very
it
basics.
does.
So I think just always pursuing more knowledge, like I craved learning more. And I think that is a key element and having like grit. Because you can't get promoted if you're constantly just like showing up for work and doing your actual job. You have to
Yeah,
do your job amazingly well and learn the job ahead of you.
exactly.
So I think that was a key differentiator for me.
One thing as I was, because I've watched a part of your story on Instagram through the years, and you would always put out books.
Yeah, I've read, oh my gosh, so many leadership and team building books. Even when I wasn't a manager, I was reading leadership books.
So how many did you think you averaged a year?
Oh my gosh. I went through a phase where I was trying to read a book a month, sometimes two, like especially if I'm on a flight. I try not to like watch a movie. I try to pick up a book and read because that's like very good uninterrupted time.
Yeah.
But I had a turning point a few years ago because we did a end of year like fun questionnaire game at a party I went to, and they asked, how many books have you read this year? And I couldn't put one book down that I had read. And this was back in 2019. And my goal for the next year is I said, I'm going to change my perspective and I'm going to try to read as many books as I can. It honestly changed my life in a way. It broadened my horizons. Like I learned so much
Yeah.
that year because I committed to reading. And I even had a tag for a while that said readers are leaders, because I think that's such a huge part of being a leader is being willing to grow and being willing to say, like, I don't know this. I'm going to go find this information from someone
Yeah.
that does. Yeah, it
Awesome.
changed my life that year.
Same type of story, because in school and throughout getting older, I hated reading. They couldn't. I mean, people were trying to shove books down my throat, and they could not do it. And
Yeah.
so finally, at a certain point, I've watched like Valuetainment, Patrick Bede, and he talks about business, and then he has that same phrase, readers are leaders.
Yeah.
And so when he was doing that, I said, well, maybe I'll give this thing a try. And
Yep.
now I read books all the time, audiobooks, wherever I'm going or driving, I have something playing so I can get better. Because
Yeah.
I'm like, I like to move fast. I don't like to sit still.
Yeah, it makes it sharpens your brain. You learn so much that you can apply to your everyday life. And then what you start to notice is you start to pick up things. Like I've been to seminars where I've heard people talk about like they've had like, their five tips to become a better person. And like I'm like, I've read that in a book. Like you start to see consistency with
Oh yeah.
things. So it
Yep.
kind of it makes you stronger, but it's also like you start to even see like my boss today, he's a huge Simon Sinek fan,
Oh
who's an
yes.
incredible
Oh
writer.
yes.
And it's like I didn't even know that. And then when we talked about it, it's like, oh, I have like 5 of his books. So we were able to connect on that. So you connect with people when you open up your mind and you explore and you read. So I'm a huge proponent for that.
When you do that, you become you have to be vulnerable with people, and that's the only way that you grow. A lot of people are trapped in that fear because they don't want
Yep.
to get hurt, they don't want to be judged. But I think I forget who said it, but he said the only way for you not to be judged is to do nothing and to be nothing. That's the only
That's
way people won't judge you.
Yeah, you're going to get judged no matter what. And I think that was like
Yeah.
just turning 30 was a huge turning point for me, because before 30, I was always like paranoid of what does this person think about me? Do they like me? I think that's a common thing. Like
Yeah.
I'm always paranoid, like, oh my gosh, that person doesn't like me. When really it's in my head.
Mhm.
I'm the one coming up with that. And the only person that affects negatively is me. So I think just getting out of that mindset is very empowering, and it will change. It's changed my life for sure.
So with going off of that book, Great Teams, you've had good teams and you've had great teams. What is the biggest difference between the two?
Well, I will say every team that you manage is different. And I thought about this question before we got on, because I've had hourly employees that were making $15 an hour. I've managed senior managers that were making $80,000 salaries a year, right? Salary and hourly employees. So you have to manage those people differently. You're not going to have the same expectations out of somebody making $80,000 a year as somebody making $15 an hour. It doesn't add up. And so I think understanding that initially and getting that in your mind, like not everybody's going to put in 100% work ethic. So you do have to pick your battles when it comes to like lower tier employees. Like that's just part of it. I think there's ways that you can motivate people regardless of what salary, what pay they have. Now, expecting that you're going to keep that person and they're not going to leave is a little short-sighted. Like, of course, they're going to leave and go to a job making more money. You want them to do that. That's how they're successful. But I think finding out what motivates individual people is the most important thing, because everybody's motivated differently. Everyone learns differently. And so getting to know the people that work with you is so important. For me, I tried to learn everything I could about my employees. What do you like? What makes your day? What is some of the things you like to do on the weekends? I like to get to know them because that made me connect with them and show them I cared about them even more than just them as an employee. So I think that's a differentiator, like getting to know them as a human and giving them a break. I think is huge. Like a lot of especially new leaders, everything they do is to pick a battle because they're so scared that they're going to get in trouble and that they're going to look weak to their staff. They like overcompensate by being like super hard and super critical. And that's the worst thing you could do. Like just being patient with people, meeting them where they're at. Of course, you have an expectation because they're getting paid, but they're human. We're all human. And I think that's a differentiator. And I think if you do that with a great team, you can make them, or a good team, you can make them a great team if you keep that mindset first and foremost. And I think also like there's a difference between managing and leading, right? That's in so many different leadership books. Like you're not cracking a whip over their heads. You're doing the work with them and you're showing them how to do the work and doing it in front of them. So I really tried, especially when I was an on-site manager, to really work with the team and be present and not like show up late, leave early, that type of boss.
Yeah.
I stayed late. I came early. And I think that instills a lot of trust and respect from your team.
With you working remotely, is it more difficult or is it the same for you?
So I'm not managing a team today. When I moved to technology, I decided to take not a step back, because I'm actually earning so much more than I was before. And I have such a great like career trajectory at this point, but I did decide to get out of leadership for a period of time. I do intend to move back into leadership, hopefully soon or in the near future, but I decided to take a step back. I did lead a remote team during COVID, and it is very challenging. I would say now that COVID is over, I think if you're a remote leader, like you have to have those in-person touch points. Like it's necessary. So like having quarterly or even annual meetings is super important. A lot of the like virtual happy hours, like nobody really enjoys. I think they're kind of a thing of the past. Like people tried to do it during COVID. It didn't go over well. And now it's like, when you're on a virtual call, it's like, when is this call over? Like, I need to go get some coffee. Like, that's kind of the mindset. So you just have to like respect that that's just the reality and see where you can make that in-person connection. Right now, I actually have 30 customers that I service here in St. Louis, and I actively go and take them to lunch and take them goodies. And I'm taking customers to a Blues game next week. So I think it's important to have in-person touch points, even if you are remote. We lost that over COVID that we really needed.
You can see it across different industries. You can see it with people, with like families, with friends. People don't hang out and just mingle together a lot anymore.
Yeah.
And I look at it and I say, well, people weren't really doing a lot of it before COVID. And then COVID took a turn, and then we're not correcting it aggressively.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think people really crave in-person connection. Like we weren't designed to be alone. We were designed to be around people. And I think even introverts, there comes a point in time where you crave that in-person connection at some point.
Doesn't it say, so be careful the company you keep because it'll corrupt you?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And not being around negative people and like focusing on the positive. But yeah, that's a huge differentiator. I think a lot of introverts, they don't like people. They do like people, but it's being around the people that bring it out of them, the best out of them.
Want to pivot a little bit. When did you get into fashion?
So I've always loved style since I was a little girl. I grew up in a household that we had a very meager life. Like we didn't have a lot of money growing up. And I would usually go to like resale shops and Goodwill and like find the cutest clothes that I could and put them together. I honestly learned a lot through like magazines. Like I loved Pinterest when it first came out, but before Pinterest was out, I was clipping designs out of magazines and putting them in a shoebox.
Oh,
That was like my Pinterest before Pinterest was a
I
thing.
got you.
So I think growing up in a like a meager environment, I never wanted people to look at me and say like, "Oh, I was homeschooled as well." So I think part of it was like a little bit of overcompensating if I'm being like vulnerable. Like I wanted people to look at me and say, "Wow, she's not like a weird homeschool freak. She's actually like a very stylish person."
I got
And
you.
I think that was like my goal when I was younger is I always wanted to dress to impress, not really for people, but for me. It
Yeah,
gave me so much confidence to dress up. And to this day, I love it, right? I love clothing. I love fashion. And it kind of became something that like as I got older and had a little bit more money, I was able to like pursue a little bit more. Like I love designer shoes, designer purses. I think it's more of a like a reward thing. Like if I do really well at work and get like a really good bonus, I buy
yeah.
myself something nice. Um, so that kind of evolved over time, I think. But I think honestly, the back to like the core of how I kind of fell into like style was I wanted people to their perception of me was important at the time. Now I feel like as I've gotten older, it's my perception of myself. Like
Mhm.
I love me and I want to put my best look or my best foot forward. Yeah, and it kind of evolved over time. So it's definitely something I'm passionate about. Like I don't dress as fashionably as I'm actually interested in. Like I love like high fashion. I
Yeah,
think my goals are to go to like Paris Fashion Week or New York Fashion Week at some point in my life just to experience it.
yeah,
I don't wear that kind of stuff, but it's cool, right? Like I'm
yeah.
interested in it. So, but yeah, that's how it all started was just a love for, wanting to be confident. And I think that it honestly added to my life in a big way.
I won't let you be out there vulnerable by yourself. I said I did the kind of the same thing. Because my parents were from Haiti, and then when they came over, they went to Miami, and so
Oh
like
wow.
my dad, he was a chef. He became a 5-star restaurant, all this kind of stuff. So they had a lot
Oh,
of money at one point.
that's
So
amazing.
when they transitioned to Jacksonville, it was different because they're two different cities.
Oh,
But
Miami is all the fashion.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's money everywhere.
Oh yeah.
So he was talking about it, and when I was growing up, I we had everything that we needed, but it wasn't the same as when they were in Miami. So when I grew up, I never wanted to put that burden on my parents. So I kind of did the same thing, but like, with suits, I wanted to look sharp. And so when I started getting older, I said, I'm gonna want to get out there and dress nice. So when people see me, they think class. They think he's
Yes.
sharp, he's a
Yep.
gentleman. So I mean, and every time and when I would be out with people and everything, my friends they would say, they I always looks nice. I was like, I sat there like, yes, that's what
Yeah,
it's about. And that's
it
the thing. I think
is.
a lot of people got confused. Like he's trying to show out. He's trying to do this and that. No, it's like I know who I want to be, and I
Yeah.
want to be here, not here.
Yes, that's right. That's
That's
right.
it.
I have so much respect for that because you don't hear that too often and people don't when you get it, you get it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I think it's made a huge impact on my life to set the bar higher than
Yes.
and I loved how I grew up. I love my parents. I have major respect for my family and where I came from. So it's not like I'm trying to like be better than where I came from by any means. I want to better myself, right?
Exactly.
And I want my kids to have something more,
Yeah.
than what I
Hmm.
had even. And that should be our goal. We should want our kids and our future to be better than what it was in the past for
Yeah.
others.
And definitely, like our parents, that's what they want. Like
Yes.
they got us to this point and said, go wherever you want to.
100%. Yeah, I love stories like that. I mean, I think it's the things that you go through, it doesn't have to dictate your future, but it does impact you. And
Yes.
we choose how it impacts us. And I do think that your perception of like how you dress and how it's not just your dress, it's how you handle yourself. What is your conversation like? Right?
Hmm.
You know how to
Yeah.
interact with people. It's the basics of like that class that you mentioned. It's more than what you're wearing, it's your attitude and how you
Yes.
perceive the world and like who you associate with.
Your
So it
character.
all ties together.
And one thing for people to remember, you only get one first impression.
That's right.
You don't get it over a second time because it'll be clouded.
That's right.
And you want to step in with your best foot forward. And if you have the people around you, they'll in your circle, they'll see everything behind.
Right.
But don't be vulnerable with everybody. That's
Yeah,
not what
you
we're
can't.
trying to say.
You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not that you're trying to like. It's not like hiding who you are because like it definitely is who I am. But I
Yeah.
mean, when I'm at home, I wear sweatpants and hoodies. Like I don't care, right? I kind of do the
Mhm.
best of both. Like I can be a bum. I can also look like really nice. Like,
Oh
and
yeah.
it isn't about like. I think that's people's misconception is like they think that it's like, oh, you're trying to be better than everybody else or you're trying to show off. It's like, no, I just want like I want to feel confident and to feel good
Yeah.
about myself. That's
Uh-huh.
literally it. And it works. It
It
literally works.
does. Yeah, it does. And people that don't believe it doesn't work, try it out, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like when you upgrade your wardrobe, it's like and I hate to say it's human nature, but you do get a lot of respect. You get a lot more respect when you take care of yourself and you present your best image. You do.
Yeah. When people talk about it and they say, well, you're trying to do it for show and everything like that. Well, I said, we know all the rewards for it. And we're trying to tell you it, but you
Yeah.
have to make the decision to change. And that's one thing people never want to change.
Yeah,
It's
you're
like,
100%
I'm
right.
okay with me. It's like, why do I have to change? Other people should change. I'm like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, they
That's
just want
just not
other
how
people
it
to
works.
accept them instead of them leveling up. They're like, "Well, just accept me for who I am. Like, you should be
Yeah,
okay with it. Just take me as I am."
it's ridiculous.
And those people don't usually get very far. So
Yeah.
I think that it's awesome to be able to connect with you on this because I think that there's very few people that understand that. And it's like you can talk to people all day long and
Yeah.
explain like, but you can see the success, right? You look at someone
Uh-huh.
that's successful, there's a reason why. And I think that's why it's so important to have mentors or people that you can look up to, not to compete with, but to be inspired by.
Yeah. And definitely like if you don't set I want to be at this level. They always taught us in different books. Look at people that have already done it and then go to them because you
Right.
don't have to recreate the wheel.
Right.
Just take what they have because that's what I wanted to do when I was looking at when I want to get married or when I wanted to read books. I said I put all these different people out there, and I'm like, okay, I can take this from this person, that from this person, and then I have all of this wisdom and knowledge that I've gained from people, and then I can put it into me. And I already
Yes.
have the determination of what I want, and then you just
Yes.
add that, you're already levels ahead of everybody else. And then you
Right.
just have to put it into repetition.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that was very impactful for me that I always keep in mind that I want to definitely share is if you should never feel like you're the smartest person in the room.
Oh, yes.
You should always feel like you are the least knowledgeable person because that
Mm,
means you're in the right space
come on.
because you can grow in that environment. And
Yes.
that's what I've always like. I remember this was before I moved to technology. I went to this like VIP happy hour at a restaurant with all of these like very like political real estate people. And I looked around the room and I thought, I've never felt more alone than I do right now. I know this is not where I'm supposed to be. And it had more applications than just one, but that's when I made the change. Like, this industry is not for me. Like, I need to start looking elsewhere. And I think when you come to that realization, it can open doors for you just by changing something in your mind to say,
Mhm.
this isn't for me. I want something better,
Yeah.
right? Just making that decision at that point in time.
And that's okay because as we've seen in the past, I'll say the past decade, the mindset of you have to work at the same place for 40 years, 30 years, that's gone.
Yeah.
It's just gone. The generation that's here now does not want that. You
No,
said it used to be work 40 years, get a gold watch, and all this retirement, all this different kind of stuff. And I was like, no. And
yeah,
that was people, they'll work their entire life, put all this money in savings and all this different kind of stuff to get to their 80s. They would live it out for a couple years and die. Nobody
that's right.
wants that nowadays. They
No.
don't.
Yeah. Now we see someone in a role for more than like 5 or 10 years and we're like, are you complacent?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you start to question that now. It's like everything is reversed, which it should. Like
Mhm.
to be in a role for 40 years, it does show that someone is consistent, but also like how many opportunities did you pass up? It's about the opportunities you pass up because that means that in 40 years you never had one opportunity to do something better or more. You
That tells
know,
a
think
lot
about
about
it.
you.
Oh yeah,
And then on the other hand, it could be that they don't want that level of success because For
Yeah.
you to agree to that level of success, you have to agree to that level of sacrifice.
That's
You just
100%
have to,
right. Yep.
because you can't do a little and get a lot. You
No,
have to do a lot to get a lot.
I definitely want to stress that like I've had to be more balanced when it comes to think how I view success. Because when I was younger, I was like hungry for more and more money, right? And I
Mhm.
got promoted and kept making more money, more money, more money. But there does come a point in time where your priorities have to shift because yes, money's important, but when you reach a certain level, you start to sacrifice your time and your family, right? And there are jobs out there where you can find a balance, but I definitely want to point that out as like
You
you
cut
never
out.
want to sacrifice your family. Well, for me, it's Christian values, my family, my time for money because it's not worth it. I
Money
want to
just
stress that success is very important, but I got out of balance with it. I
I
wanted
got
to
you.
be the president of my own management firm at some point. Like that was my
Wow.
goal. But in order to get there, I would have to sacrifice my life, my living situation. I wouldn't be able to travel. I could probably have kids, but like I wouldn't be able to devote as much time to them. So
Yeah.
I think at some point you have to be balanced and make a decision like, okay, I've reached enough of a level of success that I have a comfortable life. This is enough.
Yeah.
So I think that's where people kind of stray is they never have enough. I want a bigger
Mhm.
house. I want a bigger car. I want more money. And then it takes away their actual life. So I think that's important. Like I got very out of balance where it was like you see these podcasts where you're like, wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to the gym and do this and do that, and that's going to make you successful. It does help, but there's not a perfect formula for it,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And you can go too far. You can
You
go too
can.
far with it. So
Oh
I
yeah.
definitely want to bring that up because I think it's important for younger people to like to realize like, yes, shoot to be successful, but don't sacrifice your values or your
Yes.
family or your life.
Mhm. Because money's not everything.
No.
It really isn't. Because you
It's
can have
health.
all the money in the world and lose everything that matters.
Yeah, and
And
that's one of the things I made a vow with for Brandon and me, our relationship. We made a vow early on in our marriage that we would not ever accept a job or a career if we weren't 100% aligned or if it interfered with our marriage. So I think that is something that's very important. People make concessions and they give up things that are most valuable, and that's where you have to draw a line. And you say, I'm not going
yeah,
to give up my faith. I'm not going to compromise what I believe or my relationship with my spouse and hold to that boundary.
I've heard a lot of people that are way into in any industry, they talk about when you go into this thing, your different job or if you start a business, it's an addiction.
Yes.
If you let it become an addiction, success and going, it's a not talking about drugs or anything. It's just when you get so focused on that thing, everything can become second, and
Yes.
you won't even think about it because it's clouded, and you're
Right.
in the grind, and that's what everybody has to do. You have to be in the grind, but you have to have either people around you or that strong mental power to say, "Stop! Look, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Who am I becoming in the process of this?"
Yeah. Because you can lose yourself without realizing it, right? Like I do think evolving is good and growing as a person, but you can end up somewhere where you never intended to be, not in a good way because you can get addicted to it. It is
Yeah.
addicting.
Mhm.
Because once you get success and you get a taste for it, you're like, oh, I want more. And that's where you have to like let God dictate what you do
Yeah.
with your life and let him lead the way. And like he'll give you something you didn't expect. Like I would have never thought I would live in St. Louis, Missouri, right? My husband and I, a few years ago, we were considering very strongly to move to New York and sell
Wow.
everything we had and move. And it was at the time, it was like, hey, we can go and we can have this really baller life, but we're going to be alone. We don't really have a church group that we could go to. So our focus just shifted. And I think we all have to come to that point and
Yeah.
understand what is important to us and like what's our key priorities and then not compromise on those things. You mentioned something earlier that struck me. Social media has had a huge impact on younger people feeling like they can be successful overnight
Yes.
because all they see is the glitz and glamour and there's no like they don't see the hard work that goes into it. So to your point, I think that's kind of making people a little skewed. Like they don't really understand the work that it takes to become successful because all they see is these 20-year-olds that are like, I'm a billionaire, but like a lot of that isn't real.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's something for everybody to remember.
I'm a billionaire in crypto,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. And I'm not saying some of it's not true, but it's like the
Uh,
odds of somebody becoming a billionaire at 20 is like so slim. Like it's just not reality, right?
Before you
So
get to a billionaire, let's start at a millionaire. Let's 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 start there. You know, start at
yeah,
like a couple 100,000. Like let's start there. You know,
yeah. Have a goal that's attainable.
yeah. You said you like to travel. Said,
Yeah.
how do you plan out these trips to different countries?
Yeah. So just to give your viewers a recap, last year was our first trip to Europe. This year we've gone twice. So we've had 3 different trips to Europe in the past less than 2 years. We're actually planning to go to Japan if everything works out in the spring of next year.
That's awesome.
So for us, we saved. I think that's one of the key things I want to point out. Like money just doesn't like fall in your lap. Like we started
Mhm.
saving when we got married. We had a goal for our 5 year. Before we reach 5 years, we want to go to Europe. That was our goal that we had in mind. And we saved for that and we planned for it for years. And then COVID hit. So it was about 7 years before we actually made it just because we couldn't go during COVID.
Mhm.
Um, but that honestly, just being smart with money and like putting some away continuously and like having a goal in mind, like it doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that this is like, I'm not a finance person, so this is just how we do things. Like we do have a credit card. We pay it off every single month. We don't have a
Mhm.
massive credit card bill. We're not in debt. Which I know people may like look and I always feel like people look at my life and think that I'm like in massive debt. Like that's not the case.
Yeah.
It's just not.
It's you can have and look that great without having so much debt behind closed doors that you're completely stressed about.
Yeah, there's good debt, right? Like
Yeah.
if you
Oh yeah.
understand how finances work, you can have good debt, and we're not massively in debt, and we pay off our credit card every month, and we use our credit card. If you have the right credit card, you can get points, and you can earn
Oh yeah.
points. We actually are paying for our flights to Japan through points through our credit card.
I thought you might be.
Oh yeah. So there's always a way. Like if you actually just research, you can find out how to travel at a more affordable cost or just like accrue points with your credit card or save up for it. But that's how we've been able to travel. As far as the planning goes, like we utilize like all the technology that we have, right? 5 years
Mhm.
ago, I mean, 10, let's say 10 years ago, you didn't really have all of these like apps and things like Airbnb
Yeah.
where you could easily
Mhm.
get something booked. So we book pretty far in advance to get the best pricing, but we don't use like a travel agent. We typically don't
Yes.
spend a ton of money on like tours because you just get your money gets really sucked away when you do that kind of stuff. Like we usually, when we
Yeah.
plan these trips, like we book the things we have to book and then we kind of just like explore and we don't pay a lot for like tickets and fees to like tour this castle. Like we usually just see the castle for free and then go to the next thing.
Yeah.
So it's just like wisely, it's just planning wisely as how
I
we've been
got
able
you.
to make that happen.
And I got you too, because like before COVID, I was actually planning to go to Australia. I
Really.
had yeah, I got the whole plan. I was going to Sydney, going to all throughout Australia. And right before I was getting everything secured, getting passports, all that kind of stuff, here comes COVID. And then
Yep.
it knocked the rails a couple years. So I haven't personally been, but seeing people that have gone and talking to them on how they did it is I'm definitely going in the next couple of
Yeah.
years, but I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you definitely should. Like, I think a lot of people spend a ton of money on like going to Disney World and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
you can actually go to Europe probably for a more affordable trip than going to Disney World. So it's really just like allocating your money where you want to spend it. Like tickets to Europe are not as expensive as they used to be. We've booked flights to Europe for $1,000 per person, which I've paid that much going to Houston before because of like sky high prices. So it just depends on like just researching and finding the best deals. So it's definitely possible, but it just takes some effort and some
Yeah.
research.
What was it like building and selling a house?
Okay, so this is a loaded question because we've built 2 homes and we've now sold 2. So we're in our third house and that's been over the course. We've been married for 8 years.
Okay.
So every home is different. Our first home, we didn't like get massively in debt. We had a starter house. So it was a very affordable home. We started out pretty small. Sold that, made a good profit. So you kind of wait until the market is looking good. Like we only held on to that house for a little over 2 years. We don't hold on to homes for years and years and years because we sell whenever the market is doing well.
Yeah.
So we bought a property in Indianapolis for our second home. And we bought at a really good time where there wasn't really a lot of homes that were selling. So we found a local builder, and we actually paid less than what the home, like we paid less for what the house value was at the time. And then we sold it for a ton of profit when we sold the home. So a lot of people think, and this does work for people. So I'm not saying like, oh, this is the right way, but some people they buy older homes and they renovate them. But what we did is we built new, and we built in an area that was like under gentrification, and that value skyrocketed. So like some people invest in property where they can renovate them, which it works for them. But where we've had success is building new and selling it in a couple years. So letting it kind of build some value. And then we've made so for the profit that we sold that second home, we used that to renovate our third home. And we put that money right back and invested it into the property. So like, that's why we're able, like we have a 3,500 square foot historical home from 1902. We poured a lot of into it, but that most of that investment came from our last house. So like you just keep building on your investments, and like when you sell it when the market's doing really well, and then you leverage that and you buy your next property. So it can be, it's not an easy process. It's very difficult. Building is very stressful. So we've had 2 experiences doing that. And I think as far as the success of how we've bought and sold, that's been our strategy so far. And it's worked for us. And I think it's different for everybody, but that's our personal journey.
Do you see yourself ever buying one and putting equity into it and refinishing it and everything and keeping it to like rent out or anything like that? Or is it just, this is just what y'all wanted to do?
I don't know. Like we've kicked around ideas because we want to have some type of investments. We invest more like this in the stock market than we do in real estate, because real estate fluctuates so much. And then if you have renters, I've lived that world where you have to manage your renters and they destroy your property. So it's a lot of like headache, which a lot of people do that when they get older because they want to build like passive income. So for us, we just don't have the time. It wouldn't make sense for us to do that. We focus our time in our careers, or we have that income, and then we can just we can kind of invest that in our own property. I think we will build our own home again in the future.
Gotcha.
Once we sell our home, because then, again, like we've invested in our current home, we've renovated it. So we're going to be able to sell it for so much more. So again, we're building value. We're getting more value from having real estate and fixing it up. I don't know if we'll do like the individual rental properties, just because that's a really hard thing to do and manage when you also have like careers like we do.
Yeah.
A lot of people do that. Some people do Airbnb as well. So I think there's value in that too. But again, like, is Airbnb going to be something that doesn't exist in the future? Who knows? Right?
Exactly.
Like in 5 to 10 years, that could change. That whole business model could change. So I think our investment, like my husband is so much more he's so much more adequate to manage finances than I am. Like he's very intelligent, which I appreciate. He tries to like teach me things, but I'm like passively listening, like I'm not super focused as much as I should be. But I think that's our goal right now, is just like not overextend, because I think a lot of people, they overextend themselves and they live way above their means. And I think that's the key thing to point out. Like you just never live above your means. Like always have a nest egg where you have like 6 months plus in savings if something were to happen, where you could cover your bills. That's how we've always done it, and it's worked for us. So it's not the same for everybody, but it's really been good for us so far.
If you were starting again, and is there anything you would change in your journey?
So my husband tried to get me to move over to tech sales like 4 years ago. And I honestly should have jumped at that point. But honestly, I do feel like everything happens for a reason. Like I know that's super cliche, but I got into a senior management role because I stayed in real estate property management. And those skills that I had transfer to what I'm doing today. So like, I wouldn't say I regret that. I think we can get so caught up in our minds that we're intended to be someone or do something. And I think like I should have seen more value in myself.
I got you.
When I was younger. So I think as young people, like you just limit yourself so much because you see all these like executives at tables, especially like for women, like you see all these men making decisions and you're like, I'll never be at that table, right?
Yeah.
I'll never get there.
Hmm.
But 3 weeks ago, I was that person at the table. I presented in front of like 30 people. There were probably 3 women in the room. And it was like, wow, I can do this. And I wish
Yeah.
that I had believed in myself when I was in my early 20s or like saw this vision back then. But I think
Hmm.
it takes going through like a lot of hard knocks to get that, right?
Agreed.
So I think just like having more confidence early on and like not standing so I'm a person like I'm a quiet quitter, right? Like if I'm unhappy, I typically don't create a lot of fuss. I just leave. And
Hmm.
I think like if I would have stood up for myself a bit more when I was younger, it would have helped me and given me more like grit. And so I think that's my biggest encouragement to if I was to do anything over again, I would say like being more confident early on in myself and believing that I could do more than what I was. Like
Yeah.
just believing in myself a bit more. Because I think a lot of people from what I see struggle in that area.
I'll say one thing from and be vulnerable from me is I went to a conference last year. It was a business conference, and I think there was 1,500 people there.
Wow.
And for the first, I had been in virtual webinars, I had been in virtual conferences like that in different places, but I had never gone to one physically. And so I was talking here, I was talking to this person, trying to get different ones of my friends to go with me. But it came down to the last minute where nobody came with me. And this was my dream. This was my goal. I said, I want to clock this one off for my personal gain. And so I went there, and at this conference, we all had lanyards. So we had general, executive, platinum, CEO, and founder. Well, I said, well, I'm going to go for the general, start from the bottom and go up. So I was in, it was extremely nice hotel, event, venue, everything. Well, one morning I went, it was like a 3-day event. 3 days. And I went down there to breakfast, ordered it from the room. I walk in, everything's in the same building. I walk into the breakfast. I pick up my order. Well, because I was always trained to watch everybody. You can learn from everybody, all of this. I walk in. I did not see a single person in this place without the name tag CEO. And I'm looking around and I'm like, the first thing for me, I fell out of place. I was like, I should not be here. And I just felt everybody was watching me because I walked in, I was in a suit. I wanted to make a great impression. I
Nice.
walked in, I was in, said, this is who I am. I'm gonna put my best foot forward. I walked in and some of them I looked at, and then throughout the event, I met people. Like I met CEOs from Hungary, I met CEOs from different parts of
Wow.
the world, and I got to interact with them and talk. To these are normal people,
Oh yeah.
and they're just normal people. And so as the event, everything started to go down, and by the end of it, I had different contacts from different places around the country, different countries, just to talk to them and be like, yes, we have this, but they understood where I was coming from because they understood where getting into it in the beginning and
Yeah.
just trying. And a lot of them were trying to help me level up. So it was
Yes, I
awesome.
love that. Yeah, I think to your point, we always think people are smarter than what they actually are.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I've learned is like everybody has limitations. And just
Mhm.
because somebody is in a leadership role, it doesn't mean they know everything. They actually probably know less than what their direct reports do because they don't do the day-to-day work. And I think a lot of it is like once you get that and it clicks in your head that they're just normal people, you
Mhm.
start to bring yourself a little bit higher and closer to that level, right? Because they're not like a superhuman, right?
Mhm.
They just knew the proper steps that it took to get to that position. And sometimes people just wait it out, right? They've been at their company
Yeah.
so long, they're like, we don't have anybody else to promote. We're just going to promote this guy. So I think we forget that, right? Because all we see is their
Mhm.
title today and we run with that when really they're
Yeah.
just people like us. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good, an amazing story. I love that you did that. That's cool.
Is there any advice you would give for somebody just starting out, the 18, 19, or 17-year-old that
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
getting into it?
Yeah, I would say, the biggest advice is I think education is really important. I think for me, I went to school for something very specific, like, sign language interpreting. It's very, like, niche. I
Mhm.
would recommend going to school for just, like, a general degree. Um, I have an associate's degree and I work with people that have bachelors, right? I didn't get a bachelor's degree. And I think that people look at these fancy degrees and they think I got to go to this school and I have to have this degree. No. Like you do, it's nice to have a degree. It does help you. I think having an associate's has helped me. But what really does it for you is your soft skills, which is how you communicate, how you show up on time, how are you dressed? Can you do the job that's put in front of you and to the best of your ability? Even if you fail, are you trying, right? Are you
Yeah.
giving it 100%? So I think those skills are something that's lacking in it was lacking in my generation, it's lacking in the next generation of just like good solid work ethic, which is
Yeah.
literally just like showing up to work even if you hate your job. Show up to work because that's going to get you a
Yep.
better job. That mentality is going to get you a better job and a better paying one. And it's going to get you promotions, right? And that's it worked for me. And I'm not saying I have like the magic sauce that works for everybody, but I think those basic principles are what people should go after when they're younger. I think people tend to try like these get rich quick schemes, which irritate me to no end because I'm very against like multi-level marketing schemes because I think they steal money from like people that need the money. Like,
Yeah.
and that's my personal soapbox. But I think younger people, they see this glitz and glamour and they go after that instead of just focusing on basics, right? Because
Mm.
in my position, I'm in technology. What happens in technology, right? It's going to change. In
Yes.
5 to 10 years, everything's going to be different. So I
Mm-hmm.
think developing those skills that transfer is the most important thing for younger people. And then just like working hard and like believing in who you are as a person and just pursuing to be the best version of you. Like I know that's like super cliche to say, but honestly just believing that you can be more and do more. Because a lot of like I came from a my biological father was a drug addict and I was raised by a stepfather. He was a blue collar worker. We had very meager income. And I wasn't raised in a terrible situation, but some people are. And I think that they look at that and they think, I can never be more than this. And I think
Yeah.
people need to realize you can be so much more because you are not the situation that you're in or what you were
Exactly.
born into or your family. So
Mm-hmm.
if you like believe in that and have a goal, young people like pursue your goal and pursue it regardless of what other people tell you. Like, yes, have mentors, but like block out noise, right?
Yes.
Block out noise and just pursue your goal and develop those basic skills. So that's probably my biggest advice for young people.
And always remember that there's always going to be the people that maybe they've known you their whole life or people that you meet along the way that are going to keep you in a box
Yes.
because this is what they've always seen. This is what you've always done. So they can't see the little changes that you're making over time. And then when you come back together, you're this different person, but they still see you through those same glasses.
Yep.
And that's not your fault. Remember
Right.
that that's not your fault.
And it's not a negative because you've
Yeah.
grown, like you've
Hmm.
changed. And I've had to even kind of pull back from some people that I grew up around because all they saw was like 16-year-old Gelina that played volleyball. They
Yeah.
haven't been with me every day and seen my
Hmm.
life, right? So I think that's a really important point that you brought up. Is sometimes you evolve and it does mean that you move on from people. Like you still love them,
Yeah, of
but
course.
you take what they say with a grain of salt. And some
Mhm.
things you apply to your life, and some things you just say, I respect you, but I have a different opinion, right? And
Yeah,
you just move on.
and as you grow, you'll be able to stand your ground for what you believe in more,
Yeah.
because you won't be able to be pushed around so easily.
Oh, that's so true. When you're 20, like everybody tells you what to do. And I think that's super frustrating for younger people. I would never want to go back and do it over again because it is so hard.
Mhm.
Like you're making the most important decisions of your life when you're so young. And there's so much pressure on people, on the younger
Yeah.
people these days.
When you were talking, you remind me of a book, No Excuses: The Power of Self-Discipline by Brian Tracy. In one of those chapters, he talks about, uh, going to different people. He said he dressed for the job that he wanted to, and then he went to the leaders, and those leaders said that he was the first one of young people that came to them, and they poured into him because he was the only one.
Oh, I
So,
love
the mindset of everybody's doing it is not true,
and it's so
and
common.
yeah, and they want to put into young people But young people they don't care.
Yeah.
They want to do it
When
their
they
own
should.
way. Yeah.
When they should the most, they don't. So that's interesting. Yeah. And I think like being prepared is another thing.
Yes.
Before you go to a job interview, before you go to a presentation, before you have to submit a pitch, prepare because it will make you stand out. I think that's
Yes.
important for people to know when they're young is I actually one of the things that made me very successful when I interviewed, I got 2 jobs this way, was I created a presentation before I walked into the door for my interview. And I literally had a printed presentation of everything I wanted to accomplish in that role. And I brought it with me. And I posted about this a few years back. I don't know if you saw my stories, but I had an agenda, like I had goals that I wanted to accomplish. So when I came, it was spiral bound. I took it to a print shop and literally printed it off.
That's awesome.
And I think that that made an impression on people.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that that's one of the key things I want to share for younger people is to your point where you said that they chose the one guy that showed up. That's what it takes. You have to be the one guy or the one girl to be different. And a lot of that happens through preparation. Like come with your A game. I recently had a presentation last week where I prepped for it for probably a solid week because I'm like, I'm going to nail this and I'm going to prepare and do as much as I can. And I did, I nailed it, but I put so much prep
Let's
work into it.
go.
Yeah. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
have to put prep into it or it's going to be visible, right?
Yep.
It's going to show if you don't prepare.
I remember seeing Patrick David. He talked about this and he did all the prep work for like months. Every time he had index cards, so he would have in his pocket, be walking around, and he's like a multi 9-figure guy, but he's talked about all this different kind of stuff. And then he said on the night before, it was all these managers from around the country that were doing all this stuff. They're all going to go out to get drinks and everything the night before. And he said he stayed in his hotel room and rehearsed all night long, walking back and forth. And the next day, everybody in this whole conference said his talk was the best of the entire event.
I love that because it's so true. Like I think of people like Michael Jordan. He's one of the ones I always go to because if you watch the documentary, have you seen the documentary on him? I think it's on Netflix.
Air.
So that one's the newer one. There's one that's just about his life. Highly recommend that you watch it.
Okay.
But he basically talks about how that everybody would go out and party and do all these things, and he went like he was committed. He stayed home, like stayed in. I'm sure he probably like played around, but for the most part, he was so committed that he didn't like fool around when it was game time, right? Like he put his game face on, you went in, and that takes just like commitment. But honestly, that's what separates like good from great. That's what makes people great is they're committed to what they're doing. But yeah, I love stories like that. I think that's something that everybody should like take a mental note of. Like that's an amazing story.
Oh, yeah. And on your point of Michael Jordan, he talked about when he didn't have motivation, he took anything he could to get motivation. So
yeah.
But yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way. Like it's there. You just have to be, I think surrounding yourself with the right people is key. Because when you don't have the motivation in yourself, you can rely on somebody you're close to build you back up. And I think that's where your partner, especially for me in my marriage, that's where I've been. So I always tell people that Brandon and I are each other's like best assets because we constantly build each other up. And he's pushed me to pursue things. Yeah, like he's pushed me to pursue things I would have never pursued on my own. And I've done the same for him. So we're a team. You're a partnership. And that's what makes for me, in my opinion, a really great marriage is when you have somebody you're a partner with.
There's a reason that it says the two became one.
Yes.
You're not I, it's we.
Yes.
Always we.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of dynamics that you just, you don't want to judge people in their situation, but you take notice of what people are doing. And I feel like a lot of times when marriages don't work, it's because one person was giving and one person wasn't. It takes two. It takes a joint team. And for us, it's been where we both work. For some people, wives stay home. For some people, the dad stays home with kids, or the man stays home. So I think it's different for everybody, but that's how we've been able to be more successful. I feel like is just because we both give 100% into the partnership.
Wait, can you say that one more time? What were those numbers? You say 100% from each
100%.
other? Oh, so it's not 50-50.
No, everybody gives 100. Now there's days that you only have 10%, but
Yeah,
the goal is to give 100.
exactly. And on those days, maybe the other gives 90. I mean,
Exactly.
it just works.
Yep. That's how it should be. Definitely.
Awesome. Well, I'll wrap it up here. Thank you, Gelina, for coming on the podcast. It has
Yeah. Thanks
been
for having me.
incredible talking to you and
Thanks.
learning different things about you. And hopefully, I put some of the perceptions of you to the side when
Oh,
this
thank
comes out.
you.
People can
I
see it.
hope so. I hope so. I feel like all we can do is try to communicate. I think some things come to light as things like this happen, right? Where you get to know
Mhm.
people, and I think that with social media, everybody has an image of someone in their mind, but
Yeah.
there's a scripture in the Bible that says it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, but the honor of kings to search it out. And I think that applies to our personal relationships as well, but also like success. Like it's available to you as a person, but you have to be willing to seek for it. You can't really talk about your career or your personal life without talking about the Lord because he's involved in everything
Yeah.
and he should be the head of our life.
Mhm.
My husband and I have made several different location changes. A lot of it is related to just situational with different church experiences. But with each change, it was what we felt like the Lord was pushing for us to do. We were trying to follow his leading. Like I said before, I wouldn't choose to live in St. Louis, Missouri. I wouldn't choose to live in Indianapolis, Indiana, or Louisville, Kentucky. It just happens. I know
Yeah.
you live in Louisville, so I'm sorry. But you
That's
get it.
fine.
Like, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not a bad place. They're not bad places, but like, for us, like we would love to live in New York. We would love to live in Europe, right?
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
we make sacrifices because we feel the Lord leads us and the Lord establishes you somewhere. And wherever you're established, we're to work. And that
Yeah.
made for us, it's been our church.
Mhm.
And I feel like the Lord has honored that. I think the Lord he sees more than we see. And I think the Lord has blessed us. I don't believe in a prosperity gospel where you make these sacrifices, you're going to get these rewards. Like that's not how it works. But I do definitely feel like a lot of the attributes from our Christian life tie into your career and they tie
Yes.
in definitely your personal life with your
Mhm.
marriage and your relationships. But like a lot of those applications of what we practice make you stand out in your
Mhm.
career. Not to say that I think it's all in the way that you do it. So I think that that is kind of when I was younger, I thought that I thought I was the oddball because I was a homeschooled I was homeschooled, very conservative Christian upbringing. I looked at the world like everybody was out for something malicious. That was my view of the world, and I think like as I've grown up and I've had different careers, like I see that we're all human.
Yeah.
And whenever you put yourself on that level and you really try to implement the practices and the teachings of Christ every single day, it makes a difference in your everyday life as far as your career goes too.
The scripture also says the rain falls on the just and the unjust.
Right.
So if you're doing all these things like you're talking about, and you see other people that are worldly that are they're getting all the success, it it happens. Like if you do certain principles, it is like the cause and effect. And the Bible says
Yes.
you do this, that will happen.
Yeah.
So it's just it's a law that
Yep.
law is specific, and it's
Yep.
not a favor of persons to say.
Right. Right. I think the biggest thing for me is like as I've gotten older and I've matured, I think my view of success is now peace and
Mm,
joy and being with having time to spend with my husband, being able to travel, right? Like having enough money to pay bills, to have savings, but also to travel and experience life. That's
yeah.
all for me. That's all I could ever want out of my life. I feel like I've gotten to live my dream at a very early age. And I've been so blessed and so grateful because I know a lot of people don't get to experience that like so early on.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not everybody's life is different. Everyone's journey is different. Everyone's path is different. And I never want people to think that, oh, well, my way is the only right way because that's just not true. Right. Everybody has a different journey because we all add something different as part of the family of God. We're all to bring something different and
Yes.
something. I feel like everybody should be unique because God sees beauty in uniqueness. Right.
Yeah.
Like he didn't make just one species of birds, he made thousands of species
Mhm.
of birds and animals. That's because he loves diversity. And I think that's what's important for me, and something I've learned from a spiritual standpoint is don't like have your beliefs and have your convictions, but have a heart that's willing to be compassionate and understand other people.
Yes.
Growing up in our church, I feel like you only see this far, right? You only see this far because you only associate with these people, you go to these events. Then once you get
Hey,
out in the workforce, it's like, wow, there's a whole
yeah.
world out there,
And that's what he used to say. There's all kind of colored flowers in the garden.
right?
There's, and if God had made us all the same, we would be robots. Is
Yeah, he
it?
didn't want that.
Yeah, exactly. And with how we have our group of people, you have so many different people. Because if somebody thinks differently, they have something that you need, and
Oh,
you have
100%.
something that they need. So
Right.
don't think like that's one thing that I utterly despise. I'm only gonna go to these certain meetings. I'm only gonna hang out with these certain people, and you're only gonna be this exact way because of you.
Yes,
That's just
yes.
that's it.
It's danger. It's a danger because when Jesus came, he didn't say, okay, I'm just going to hang out with my disciples. We're going to have great
Exactly.
services. You know, it's us four no more. He said, go and you spread this gospel and you spread this message. And I
Hmm.
think that's still the call today. I don't think that's changed because we believe in a high calling. I think that our calling is to be Christian in every situation that
Yes.
we're in. Um, and we're to show God's love to the world, and it affects our everyday life. Um, but yeah, I think that's one of the biggest for younger people. The biggest thing I would say is like don't don't think that your view of the world is correct. Like experience
Exactly.
it, but have a
Hmm.
safeguard. Right? You got to guard your heart. You have to guard your
Of course.
mind. You can't let because people will influence you. Social media influences you and how
Oh
we.
yes.
But let the Lord lead and guide, and then He'll direct you and
Yes,
be
you will.
open to that. I would say just the biggest thing that I've always prayed for my life is to be open to that and willing to say, God, whatever you want for me, whatever you lead me, I'm willing to go. And he's blessed
Hmm.
me because of that. And I say I wouldn't choose to live in St. Louis. I love living here. I love my church. I love my friends. But being here was following the Lord's leading, not my own.
I'll tell you. I'll impart on that too, just for a second. I said you what you were talking about. I can resonate with that because I told you I came from Jacksonville, Florida, and I now live in Louisville, Kentucky,
Yeah.
and I love my home. I love the people here, but I wouldn't have choose to be here
Yeah.
because if I cannot stress how much we prayed and fasted to make a jump like this because my entire family is in Florida. Like my immediate family, all of my cousins, like my dad's family, they're in New York or around New Jersey, all the different. Nobody is close to me time wise, so
Yeah.
it wouldn't make sense for me to move here.
You're still
But
sacrificing a lot to be there.
exactly, and that's what I felt that this is where I was supposed to be. I didn't understand it, you know what? But since I've been here, it's very well evident that this is where I'm supposed to be.
The Lord directs and we look to him. I think it's important to have believers around us to support and we can share with
Mhm.
and have a minister to guide as far as like, sharing the word of God. But I think we have to give over to what the Lord wants for us and block out the rest of the noise.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, I think that's from a spiritual standpoint, that's probably the biggest things that I would share.
Okay.
Is just like let the Lord lead and a lot of the other things for your where you live, where you travel, where you work, like a lot of that falls into place because he guides and he leads in every area of our
Exactly.
life.
Of course. Well, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah.
And remember to like, share, and subscribe. And take care. And we'll see you in the next episode.